Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to participate at your conference, and I'm really impressed by both the number of participants at this conference, but also by the commitment of both the public as well as private sector representatives to do their best in order to increase the exports of Greece, and also to use that in order to increase the growth and jobs in Greece. From that point of view, I think that the topic of my presentation, namely how can trade contribute to growth and jobs, will be appropriate for your conference. But in my presentation, I'd like to emphasize mostly the role of the EU trade policy, namely how the EU trade policy can help the exporters in Greece to have a better access to the markets. And certainly, as there will be specific panels and workshops this afternoon, which will address the particular markets, but I guess that the background of what EU trade policy is about would also be useful for you. So I'd like to start with some general background, how trade is actually contributing to growth and jobs in Europe as general. But then I also have a few slides to show what could be the potential for Greek exporters. And finally, we'll speak about trade policy and, in particular, market access strategy, which could also help you. Now, if you look at this map, and we'll have a look where are the major sources of growth, or the main growth areas, then you can see that most of growth is actually concentrating in Asia, as well as in Latin America, also in Africa, that is in the emerging markets. And actually, the forecasts show that by 2015, 90% of future economic growth will be generated outside of Europe. What does it mean? It means actually that in order to grow, you should focus into the growing markets. And actually the EU countries can benefit from the emergence of new economic powers, which are very often referred to as the BRICS, and some of those will be also the focus of your conference later. Now, trade is not only contributing to GDP growth, but also to job creation. Namely, in 2007, extra EU exports supported around 25 million jobs, which represented around 11% of total employment in EU 27. Certainly, this is not a small figure. And actually, there have been an increase of the jobs related to exports since 2000. Now, but if we look at how Greece stands in the comparison with other countries, and I think this is something that also the previous speakers have pointed out, is that in Greece it's less than in other countries. Namely, if you look at the countries with the dark green, in which the jobs related to extra EU exports is the highest, then certainly in case of Greece, it's not the same. And now, as I've heard, that there have been a positive movement specifically as to the growth of exports last year and this year. So these are still the figures of 2007, which is pre-crisis. But at that time, the sales of goods and services to the rest of the world, that is outside the EU, represented around 3% of total employment in Greece. Moreover, and contrary to what happened in the EU as a whole, the contribution to trade to job creation actually decreased from 2000 to 2007. Now, what are the factors which contributed to this? Namely, first of all, Greece exports actually tend to be more oriented towards extra-EU markets than the EU average. But the share of exports over the GDP remains well below that of other comparable small EU member states. Here in the table is the comparison with Belgium. And if you, for instance, if you take the figure of what is the share of extra EU exports over total exports, then it's actually higher in Greece than in Belgium. It's 42% in Greece and only 23.7% in Belgium. But if you look at the total GDP shares, then it's only 14.7% in case of Greece and nearly 60% of Belgium. So this is what makes the difference. But I think that Mr. Reichenbach gave the figure of 20% as of last year, so actually now it has increased also in Greece. At the same time, Greek exports have become less labor-intensive than the EU average. Now, next, let me look at microdata. I'm afraid you can't see all the figures here, but in general, one can say that many Greek firms are exporters. And if you take the sectors which are with the highest share of exports to your left, like clothing, wood, production of wood, metals, rubber, food and beverages, here actually the exports, the exporters are more than 80% of the total firms in those sectors. But now on the next slide, it actually becomes clear that what is the problem is that they sell abroad only a small fraction of their output. The average export share is 30%, and which is well below the average in other EU member states. So this is actually the reason. But what I'd like to finalize here is actually that what is the weakness today can actually be the basis of the future export growth. Namely, on the one hand, as we can see that many companies are exporting, but they are marginal exporters as they do not export the major share of their production. But on the positive side, these marginal exporters can turn to foreign markets more easily than those firms which have never exported, as it's certainly it is easier for the company which has already foreign distribution network. It's much easier and much less costly to start to sell more than for those who are actually entering first time the new markets. And this process can lead to a long-term successful expansion of the export sector only in case, certainly if also the bigger firms are involved. And I think that your Deputy Minister also mentioned that these are mainly the small and medium-sized companies that are exporting. But I think this is something that you can also discuss in more concrete terms in some of your workshops, discussing namely what are then the impediments which actually do not let to increase the exports of the companies to grow. But now, next, I'd like to turn to the trade, the EU trade policy, and namely to speak what are the main pillars of the EU trade policy. These are first the multilateral policy, bilateral policy, and finally market access strategy. Now, unfortunately, the negotiations at the multilateral negotiating Doha round are stuck for the time being, but at the same time, the EU has not been sitting still, but we actually delivered a lot in terms of the bilateral agreements, mainly free trade agreements. And in a second, I'll also speak about those in more detail. And finally, the market access strategy, which I will also focus separately. Now, first of all, if you look at those map, here you can see with green those agreements, free trade agreements, which are already in force, and with yellow, 2 agreements with Central America and Colombia, Peru, which were actually signed last week. And certainly here I'd like to mention the agreement with South Korea, which now have seen its 1 year in force as of the 1st of July. And also if you take the countries with whom the Greek exporters will have the interest, like the EA and the Euromid agreements, certainly would be of interest for you. But now, the next slide, there are many more agreements to come, as actually EU has 33 ongoing negotiations at different stages, and will, with India, Canada, and Singapore, the negotiations are at an advanced stage. Now there will be also actually there has been the launch of the new agreements with both Eastern Partnership countries as well as the Southern Mediterranean countries. Now negotiations have been concluded with Ukraine, which is also the focus of one of your workshops today. And now there will be the discussions first at the college level and then in the council about the launch of the negotiations with Japan as well as with the US, as these will be, alongside with Canada, the first major developed countries with whom we are going to have negotiations. And if you have particular questions, perhaps these could be then addressed at a later stage. Now, just to give you one example of actually what benefits can these free trade agreements bring to the companies. And if you take the EU-South Korea Free Trade Agreement, which is in force as of the 1st of July last year, now, for instance, it will save some 1.6 billion euros in customs duties per year, and it will create new trade opportunities to the size of nearly 20 billion euros after the full implementation of the agreement. It will also improve access for service suppliers. What is new in this agreement, that it also tackles the non-tariff barriers, as we know that very often it's not only the tariffs, but the different requirements concerning the technical barriers of trade, sanitary, phytosanitary requirements and things like that, which are also addressed in this agreement. I guess pharmaceutical annex would also be of interest for the Greek exporters' point of view. But it also brings about better protection of intellectual property, strong competition rules, and commitment to sustainable development. And last but not least, I'd like to bring out the benefits of the market access strategy for the companies, as I know that There are numerous company representatives at this conference. So what I'd really advise you to do is to go to the DG Trade website in the European Commission and look for Market Access Database. As this is the free database, it has been paid by the Commission, and it's free for all the users, and it's regularly updated. And there you can see, you can find all you need to know about the markets. That is the tariffs, also the non-tariff requirements, and things like that. But you can also find the key, what I call the key barriers list, namely what are the barriers in different markets. And how do we address those barriers is via the market access strategy, which is a close cooperation which brings together the Commission, the member state, but also the business representatives. And the purpose is first to identify what are the barriers in particular markets, but to analyze them, and finally to remove them. And actually we have around 50 success stories per year, namely where we've been able to remove the barriers which have been on the markets. And I'd like just to give you a couple of examples which are representing the cases which have been of interest to Greek exporters. And one of them was that owing to this good cooperation and also the measures that we can use, namely how we target those barriers, is via the regular dialogues that we have with the third countries. If necessary, these are also raised at the highest level if we have the summits with the countries. But also what is also the purpose of this key barriers list is that it's not only the Commission representatives that raise those barriers, but it's also for the member states who do so via their embassies in the third countries, or if their dignitaries, the ministers visit those countries, that they can also raise those. And just to give you a couple of positive examples, namely as a result of that, Uruguay lowered its import duties on canned peaches, which it had increased the tariffs to 55%, using the derogation that it has in the Mercosur common external tariff, and applied an import duty on canned peaches of 55% instead of 14%. And this it had done since 2001, and now, as a result of this market access work, it lowered it as of the January of 1st January this year. And another example is an import ban on cotton that Egypt used to use, namely due to the SPS requirements. And this was removed as of March 2010. And there we namely used also the information that we got from the businesses, but also from the member state. In this case, it was namely Greece. Now, in our market access strategy, there is a strong focus also on SMEs, and this would be certainly useful for the Greek companies, as we've seen that these are mainly the small-sized companies that are exporters. And now how this functions is that we have the Market Access Committee, which meets once a month in Brussels and brings together also the member states and the business associations. But there are also sectoral market access working groups focusing on specific sectors. And then there are also local market access teams which are present in the markets themselves. And to see in which countries we have them, you can also consult this market access database. They are in more than 30 countries, and namely they are using the local knowledge of both the EU delegations, member state embassies, but also the business representatives who are on the ground there. And they have this kind of early warning function Sometimes they inform, for instance, that a particular country say that India is planning a new telecommunication law, which will have an adverse effect on our exporters, and then we can address it even before the country actually takes the action, which normally works better than if you act afterwards. And in these market access teams, there will be SME context point available soon. So this would be also a very useful tool for Greek companies. And now, just to the last thing I'd like just to make a reference is something which would be addressed at the next panel, namely the trade finance issue, which certainly is a very serious issue, namely affecting trade conducted on an open account basis. And as you've heard, Task Force for Greece, but also other member states' export credit agencies are currently considering the solutions. So in conclusion, the growth, as we've seen, outside of the EU is a great opportunity. And certainly DG Trade of the Commission is actually pursuing new opportunities for the EU companies. And finally, I'd like to wish all the success to the Greek exporters, but also to your government in order to really achieve those very clear objectives that you've set for yourselves. Thanks a lot for your attention.